Okay, let's take some of the ideas of EQ that we learned and apply it to this track. Before I do that, I want to quickly also kind of point out another effect or processor that I love to use on drums. So right now we have our gates. I'm going to add a dynamic processor called the transient master in mono. And what this does, it's really quite simple. I've never actually looked at the presets because it's so simple. You can increase the attack or decrease, and you can decrease or increase the sustain. Think of this on a drum as if you hear the rattle, or let's just listen to it. On kick, besides that our gate's not perfect there, I'd like to increase the attack. So it hits a bit harder already right out of the gate. Do I want to kind of get a longer feel out of it, or even tighten it up more? Interestingly, in a way, it kind of almost kind of enhances what the gate's doing. It's probably more obvious on the snare drum. I already have one in here. I'm not in a good spot. There we go. You do want to be careful that you're not simply increasing the gain and tricking your ear into thinking that you've done something cool. You hear it's like shh. So it's definitely shorter. And I like to do that to the under snare as well. Because I don't like the kind of shh extended sound of the under, especially. Killing me softly with his song, telling my whole life. Okay, so I like to do that before I get into EQing, because that is kind of the base that I want to work from, and that will inform any changes that I make EQ wise. You're going to hear a lot of people say, if you listen to a lot of people, that you really shouldn't spend a lot of time EQing in solo, because you can spend a lot of time perfecting a kick or a snare, and once you drop it back into the mix, it doesn't fit with everything else. So we are going to do some of that in solo so you can hear the changes, hopefully, over YouTube. At least we're going to talk through them. I'm also going to refer to this cheat sheet that I've given you, because there's some thought to these things besides the things that sound good, perhaps, for one drum. I want you to pay attention to this idea of cutting 150 to 250 on the kick, and then being able to possibly increase that in the snare. So you're kind of like cutting a hole for this to then kind of like slide into. Get away from this section here. All right, so I am going to plug in the Ozone 11 so that we can see it and everything. I'm going to kind of explain some of the things that I'm doing or what I've done. I'll unbypass it. So I am just kind of, actually, let's just make it a default. I'm going to roughly 60 and see how it defaults to a low shelf. A shelf means that it is taking everything above or below the point that you've created, the band that you've created, and raising it. So if I make it a high shelf, it'll be everything above that point. I'm going to make it a bell. And bell is essentially that parametric idea that you have frequency, amplitude, and bandwidth. And I'm going to aim for roughly 60. I'm going to open this up just a little bit. All right, so we're kind of at the lower range of where our low end on that kick drum is disappearing. Okay, I don't want to go too crazy so that you can really, really hear it, but I'm going to put in 3 or 4 decibels of gain. And then if I think about, okay, I would like to cut at about 150. Okay, I'm doing that with a bell as well. That rhymed. And then I do like to try and find an area that's kind of that cardboardy sound. And I've always felt that it's a little bit higher than that, but okay, it might be a little bit hard to hear some of these things. And then the beater. How can we get to the beater? We definitely want that to be a bell. I'm going to narrow the Q on that one. So that's a trick here. If you really, really push the amplitude and kind of sweep, you can kind of find where it's at. So right around in this area, I do feel that this did some cleaning up of the sound there. All right, let's listen to the snare drum. So for the snare drum, what I did first was create what's called a high-pass filter or a low-cut filter. And a filter is anything below this point is gone. And there really isn't much to begin with. A little bit of this low end. But this is the type of stuff that's going to mask what's coming out of the kick drum. So that's not doing all that much for us anyways. Then I'm going to come in at around, I went a little bit higher with this. Roughly 150 to 200-ish. I ended up a little bit below or closer to 250. Again, that boxiness around 700, 650. And then maybe just bringing up a little shelf starting at roughly 3,000 or so, just to give it some brightness to cut through. So another thing that I chose to do when I played with the kick, it's going to be different now. I like to use these EQs that have the graphic on it so that I can I like to see things and make more of my kind of precise adjustments. And then I like to sometimes add a more color-based, color meaning non-specific, non-precise types of EQ. So on this one, what I've done is you have your boost and attenuation, so you can actually add or cut. This is pretty simple. It's a 2-band EQ with a filter. Does it have a filter? No, it doesn't have a filter. But you can kind of adjust your bandwidth. So I chose to go to 60 and boost it by about 4 decibels on the kick, giving us a bit more body. And then I went to 3,000 and boosted, 3,000 and boosted by about 3. I'm actually going to change that. I'm going to go to about 4 because that helps get that beater too. I actually don't like too much of that. All right. So a little kick and snare EQ. I don't tend to do much to the sub kick because it is, a sub kick. But let's see what it looks like anyways using. So if anything, what I would do is put a low pass filter and this is the slope. Make that 12. That's just to clean up some of the stuff that we don't really hear in it. As I was lower, I could hear that I was cutting off. There's a little bit of brightness to that. On the overheads, I would like to, let's try this Pultec. And I'm going to go to about 5,000. Just to brighten up the cymbal a little bit. I'm going to copy that one. And every time that I'm boosting, sometimes I'm going to make adjustments to my volume just because things are changing. They are evolving. Because as I'm adding things, that's adding gain to that particular track. All right, I'm going to do one last thing on the drums. We're going to call it a day because we haven't really gotten to the toms. We're going to deal with those separately. So we have put some transient shaping on the kick and snare and under snare, and we EQ'd. I could definitely EQ the under as well. Added some more colorful EQ, put some EQ on the overhead and hi-hat. And now, this is kind of jumping ahead, but now let's just call it a day.